Hey kids, we're here with K.O. Skinsness. He's the president of Stomvi-USA. He's also a designer of mouthpieces and a student of acoustic science as it pertains to our trumpet world. So we're going to have a little talk with him and try and find out some of the cool things that he knows about our trumpet world. So one of the things I've heard you talk about, and it's I don't know if it's controversial, but there's definitely discussion, I'll put it that way, about trumpets that have heavy bracing and you know, all the ornamentation that they do to the trumpet to make it look really, really cool. I guess there's claims of like the bracing is connecting the vibration, so it's adding to the instrument. And there's a lot of different I guess descriptions of or ideas of what the heavy bracing is really doing. So what is heavy bracing doing? Because it's obviously not, it has nothing to do with the air column, so it's not changing the intonation. What's it changing?
Right, so as I mentioned that I've watched every video on the Hey Kids channel more than once, I'm sure John's watched every video that I've done at least more than once as well. And so what he's referring to is, it's called damping. And I did a video called The Deal with Damping. I'll explain a little bit here. So basically there's two kinds of damping in the trumpet. Acoustic damping and mechanical damping. But what is damping? Okay, it's like the air column, which has a simple definition. Air column is the air inside the tubes of a wind instrument. Damping has a pretty simple definition as well. If you have a vibrating system, resonating system, anything that decreases the resonance of the system is damping. Damping is anything that decreases the resonance of the system. Okay? So, why would you want something that decreases the resonance? I want my trumpet to sound big and full and resonant. Why would I want to decrease the resonance? Well, it's a simple trade-off, if you will. The more damping you add, the easier it is to play the trumpet. It's easier to start the note. But the note you get is less resonant than if you have less damping. So if you look at a typical frequency plot of a trumpet that's looking like that, and you look at the top of any one of the notes, right? We call the top the Q. And as you increase the damping, the Q broadens out. Okay? The top of the note gets less of a sharp peak on it and becomes broader. That's sort of like making a bigger target. So if the peak is really, really sharp, you got to hit, and I'm not talking about pitch, if it's a very well-defined peak, you need to hit that note right in the center to get that note to speak and to resonate. If it is very well-defined, and you do hit it right in the center, you're going to get this incredible resonance. Okay? So as we add damping, and we're talking about mechanical damping now, which would be bracing, heavy bottom caps, brass valve guides, solder that you wrap around the horn because you're bored one night. This well-defined peak becomes less defined, it becomes broader, and the target for each slot gets a little bit bigger. So it gets easier to start the note because you don't have to be as accurate with where the center of the pitch is, but the resulting resonance, the resulting sound of the note is not as resonant as with the more defined, the less damping. Okay, so what you're trying to do as a trumpet player is find the amount of damping that makes the instrument easy enough to play. You can find the slots, it's comfortable, without killing the resonance too much. Most instruments that have a lot of heavy metal on them, and I'm not talking about Striper or Metallica, a lot of heavy metal on the trumpets, all the jokes can't be good, folks, I'm sorry. A lot of mass added to the instrument all over the place don't have a really big full resonant sound, but they're often really, really easy to play. I remember when I was working with Bob Reeves at his shop in Hollywood, a really, really good high note trumpet player named Mac Golahan. That's right, we're naming names in this interview. Mac Golahan came into the shop and he wanted a valve alignment on a couple of his horns. And I said, no problem. So he takes one of the horns out. I don't remember what brand it was, what horn it was, but this horn was completely covered from bell through everything with melted solder. It was the strangest looking horn I'd ever seen in my life. But it's a horn he's playing and he wants a valve alignment on it. Okay, buddy, you got it. So I said, all right, well, go get some lunch. That was my little trick. If I wanted to play a horn that someone had brought in because I was interested, rather than ask, hey, can I play your horn? Because they might say no. You got to go get some lunch. Give us a little bit of time here to do this. So he goes, okay. So as soon as he left, I put my mouthpiece in and I started playing this horn. This was back when I was a high C or high D player. I couldn't play above that. Man, I played that horn and all of a sudden I'm playing high G's and A's like crazy. They were coming out so easy. This was way before I knew Cardwell or anything. And I'm looking at this horn going, wow, what's up with this? But when I played it, it sounded really weird. It didn't have resonance or anything. Now, Mac's a whole different story. He sounds great on whatever he plays. But that's a whole nother topic. Looking back, it's because the horn had so much mechanical damping that it was really, really easy to play. It was easy to start the notes. It was allowing me to play some notes that I couldn't play before. And so, yes, with damping, you can do some of that as well. For me, the sound wasn't any good. My mouthpiece, that instrument, etc. The sound was not good, but it sure was easy to play. The other type of damping is acoustic damping, a little bit harder to understand, a little bit more difficult to explain. Has the same effect of changing the well-defined peaks to less defined. A simple way to affect the acoustic damping in an instrument is with bad valve alignment. The more out of alignment the valves are, the more those peaks become less defined. So, the horn that I'm talking about that Mac brought in, also when I played it was before the valve alignment. So it had not only all this mechanical damping from the solder all over the place, and Mac, someday I got to ask you, what made you think of that? But aside from that, it had bad valve alignment, which gave even more acoustic damping, which made it even easier to play, but also is killing the resonance.
Interesting. So, in all this, I guess trumpet manufacturers, understand this to whatever degree they understand it, and they decide to go with the bracing or whatever to get the horn to play easier. I guess that's. I don't know whether they're doing it purposefully or it's a byproduct of what they're doing, but that's.
Well, I don't know if anyone anywhere knows or thinks about damping when they're designing an instrument other than ourselves, because I'm not in the minds of anyone at any other trumpet makers. But my suspicion is it's part of the process when they're working with another player trying to develop an instrument. They move the brace and I like that better. Now why they're moving it, I don't know. Maybe they think it's affecting some nodal point in the horn, because there is lore like that, which unfortunately is not correct. Maybe they're thinking something else. I've heard people say that when you add mass to the horn, it deadens the setup. Well, it's kind of true because it's killing the resonance, but then they take it to the next logical intuitive step, which is, so if the system is deader, it causes the player to put more energy into the horn, which gives it a bigger, fuller sound, but the player is working for it. I don't believe that that's the case. It's very common for someone to say, I put heavy valve caps on my horn and the sound got darker. Well, what I know from the science behind it is that as those peaks become less defined and get broader, you start to attenuate, you start to cut the high frequencies first. So that means relative to the rest of the sound of the horn, the high frequencies start to go away. So it sounds darker. But truth be told, when I hear instruments like that, they often sound dull to me, not dark.